Hello, I am Mike Porath, the founder and CEO of The Mighty, and we've got two great guests today to talk about something that a lot of people are thinking about and feeling anxiety around, which is just the mental health of our children and the parents out there with kids heading back to school in some new ways. And so I want to welcome Dr. Stephanie Lee, who is the Senior Director of the ADHD and Behavior Disorder Center at the Child Mind Institute, and Dr. Liz Matheis, who is a clinical and school psychologist. Dr. Stephanie, do you want to just give the folks out there a little bit more of your background and kind of your perspective on this, and Dr. Liz, you as well?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you to the Mighty for having us and really focusing on this very important topic and kind of putting it in the forefront for parents, because we know that it's at the top of their mind and at the top of their thoughts. So just to give you a little bit more to breathe life into that background for me, I like to tell people that informally, it's important for folks to know that I have 3 brothers and a football coach dad. So, they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. And so I jokingly say that I was an expert in problem behavior by the time I was 12 or 13. But my doctorate I received at Rutgers University in the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology. As part of my clinical internship, I completed that at Hopkins at Kennedy Krieger Institute specifically, which is a specialized hospital in Baltimore, part of Hopkins that's for kids and families with children with special needs. I'm an upstate New York lady, so if you told me I was going to spend about 9 years of my life in Baltimore, I never would have anticipated it or expected it. And as I did spend most of my career at Hopkins at Kennedy Krieger in the behavior management clinic. So I did slowly but surely find my way back to New York, and that's when I started at Child Mind Institute. We're really evidence-based and really helping kids and families, I think, in 3-pronged way. We're trying to provide direct clinical care and then also disseminate information in ways like this. So I'm really excited to be a part of this panel. I work mostly with kids and families. I do a lot of parent training, helping parents to manage problem behaviors and emotions that get really big. So again, I'm just really excited to be here and to be able to focus on a topic that I am talking about every single moment of my day with parents and thinking about myself personally.
I am sure. Thank you. Dr. Liz?
I'm a clinical and school psychologist, as you said, and I'm in private practice in New Jersey. I am first and foremost a mom of 3, ages 14, 11, and 7. And so a lot of the things that I'm facing are things that parents around me are facing. I have a team of therapists who provide a variety of services to children, adolescents, and young adults with anxiety, ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, as well as behavioral struggles. As you had mentioned, this is absolutely at the forefront of our minds, and there's so much change going on during a time where it's hard to make sense of it all, and more so than just us as adults trying to get through day to day and work and get through life. We have children who are having a lot of different responses. Some of them are surprising, some of them are positive, and some of them are just debilitating. And so on a day-to-day basis, like Dr. Stephanie, we are thinking about this every day, thinking about education, thinking about anxiety, thinking about social distancing and social learning, and distance learning. I'm confusing all my terms today, but it's just such a part of our everyday, and I'm in it not only as a professional, but most importantly as a mom.
Great. Well, thank you both. And like you, I've got kids at home. I've got 4. Oldest is 13, and she's autistic, which brings some different challenges, with it. And then we have 3 boys who are 11, 8, and 10 months old. We just realized that the youngest has lived half his life in a pandemic. So interesting, but not in school for this. So I'm curious. You both talk with parents a lot. We'll talk first kind of around really the mental health of kids and how we can help and support them. And then I think we'll move the discussion in the second half more toward the parents and their roles in all this, and making sure that, we're finding ways to support their mental health as well. Mm-hmm. What are the questions that you're getting from parents right now? What are the concerns that are coming up in the conversations that you're both having?
It's a great question, Mike. I would say that, I imagine that DrLiz and I have very similar experiences in that, a lot of parents have concerns about what is typical and what should they actually be worried about, right? What do they need to seek help with, and what is actually just typical within this new normal, right? Or kind of a result of just an increase in stress that everyone's experiencing. And so I do know that I'm talking a lot with parents about checking in about the big three, right? So I'm talking with parents a lot about let's talk about sleep routine. Let's see how that's been going, right? Even if your sleep routine has shifted to different times, are you getting enough sleep, right? Are your kids getting enough sleep? We talk about eating and kind of nutrition and kind of where that's at. Many of us are maybe eating a little more or a little less than we were previously or pre-COVID. And so kind of checking in with folks about that. And then activity level, right? So are your kids getting enough activity? We know that they're getting a lot more screen time these days, and we do need to kind of be flexible and lax about that to some degree. And we also want to make sure that we are providing opportunities that might have been a little bit more organic previously with our kids to be active, to be engaged, to kind of be motivated, right? And moving and grooving, right? So I think those are things that we're checking in with parents about and really helping them to decide, is this a big deal that you need more help and resources with, or can you kind of monitor and wait to see?
Yep.
Likewise, seeing a lot of that. You're right. A lot of the questions I'm also getting have to do with parents who have been the teachers for their children and realizing that the things that teachers once saw and solely at school, they're also seeing at home now, and wondering, is there something going on learning-wise, and really reaching out for evaluations and trying to determine what kind of supports their children need in school. And try to, create consistency and routines at home, especially during this time, and what to look for if, they do need support, like you said. But that's a big one for us right now, is that we're seeing a lot of, does my child have a learning disability? There's so much I'm seeing now that I'd never seen before. I used to say, but my child never does that at home, but now they're doing that at home and I'm seeing it. So what is this? Help me translate. So.
One of the things that's pieces of conversations happening in my house, and I've talked to others about this, it keeps coming up, is parents right now don't have all the answers. I mean, of course we never do, but we're all living in a pretty unpredictable time right now. So how do you work with parents, or how should parents kind of approach talking to their kids about these unpredictable times where we don't have the answers? We're all kind of going forward together like this. And so how do you advise parents to work with their kids around this?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'd say that, the very first thing that I let parents know is that we want to encourage kids to come to us with their questions. And the best way to do that is to actually praise them when they do come to you with questions, and to open up a dialogue so that you really do have this back and forth, and we're not inadvertently making assumptions about what questions your child does have, right? Kind of meeting them where they're at and trying to learn a little bit more about what they've learned here and where they were getting their information, so that you can think a little bit more about filling in gaps developmentally and in a developmentally appropriate way. And then also being really clear and honest, I think, with your kids in what feels like a comfortable and sensitive way to say, I have some of those questions too. That's a great question. It's hard when you don't know the answer. And here's what I do when I'm wondering about this. I think about it. I think, and then I move on, or I distract myself and know that I'm going to learn a little bit more about that tomorrow. So I think it is really just important, first and foremost, to make a big deal out of your kids' willingness to even engage you around this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. I always ask parents to answer just the question that's been asked of them. Sometimes children ask a particular question that they want the answer to that particular question. And as parents, we assume that there is a broader scope. And so we go really big and we answer lots of questions. And sometimes that can be overwhelming for our children because they're getting a lot more information than they anticipated. And now you're talking about different topics that they didn't initially have in mind. So I tend to say, just answer the question, 2 to 3 sentences. If you go on beyond that, you've probably spoken too much.
I am so guilty of that one. I'm definitely taking that piece of advice home with me. So another piece of conversation that has been coming up a lot is how to talk to kids just about coronavirus, and whether it's the risks or the masks or everything around it. A colleague recently was telling me that he has a 3-year-old daughter, and when they walk down the street and there's someone coming the other way, like she just knows now. She's like, oh, we have to be on the other side. And one of his concerns is, what's the long-term mental health issues that is she going to be afraid of other people or, about this? So I'm just curious what advice you give parents, and just in terms of talking to their kids about coronavirus in a way that is open and honest and trying not to be too scary, but also, kind of get facts across.
I think kids are pretty much more resilient than we give them credit for. And I think once, right now, your friend has taught his daughter to go to the other side of the street because there's a reason for it, right? Not because he's scary or not because other people are a source of danger, but because we need to keep our distance so nobody gets sick. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I hope soon, we will be able to walk on the same side of the street and it will be okay. And it's amazing how we quickly adjust. And really, I feel like my kids personally have adjusted to a lot of this far better than I ever did. Like I went into quarantine kicking and screaming and crying. I'm not talking about the kids, I'm talking about me. They adjusted to the new norms. And again, when it comes to kids with the masks and all that, I think giving a very simple explanation of what is relevant to them, their life in the moment only. And at this point in time, it's also very hard to project. It's hard to project what's going to happen in September. And my 11-year-old daughter is very anxious. And so she's asking me, what's it going to look like? She's going into middle school. And she wanted so badly to have that typical middle school experience like her brother did. I said to her, I don't really know what it's going to look like. And truthfully, we may get information now and it may change later. So I think it's good for us to kind of have an idea of what the school is thinking, but with the understanding that it might change. And so, for someone who is undeniably a very anxious person, ironically, during this time, because information is changing so much, instead of going long-term, I'm learning to keep it to today. So really thinking about today. So when you get a lot of questions about the virus, think about it in terms of what is relevant to your child. Answer the question. If you're not sure, ask them what they mean and answer that question only. Because usually it's like, am I going to have to wear a mask? And if you go into the bigger picture of you're going to wear a mask in this setting, that setting, here, there, ask them, where are you thinking you need to wear the mask? And it may be, am I going to need to wear my mask in my classroom? And the answer is yes. And that's it. And that satisfies them and off they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say it's, similar types of things. And I think, making sure that you're understanding where your kids are coming from. I think, it's also just very relevant to, like Dr. Liz is saying, to say, I don't know when you don't know, and that's okay. And you're modeling that you're okay with the uncertainty in some way. And that really can be helpful to them. We don't know what the long-term effects for these kids are going to be just yet, because really they are our guinea pigs to some degree, because we've never been through this pandemic and we've not done remote learning in these ways. But I think to Dr. Liz's point about how resilient kids are, when we look at information from previous traumas or previous situations where, we know that kids who are more impacted by mental health issues are likely to be impacted more, right? And that they're likely to have more difficulties. We know that populations of folks who are already compromised, right, due to maybe SES or different factors, that they're going to, again, even be more impacted. But we do have some good news even about, not just child resiliency, but about masks and about how kids can learn even through a mask, right? So we do have we do have research to suggest that the majority of our emotions are expressed through our eyes and eyebrows. And actually kids can read and learn about emotions even when someone's wearing a mask. So I think that, again, as maybe you started, and I don't know if anybody heard this before the broadcast started, but you have a child who's lived more time in pandemic than they've not, right? And again, I know it's hard to teach old people new things. Young kids usually adapt pretty quickly. They're pretty flexible, and they're going to take their cues from us.
That's great. And you had mentioned, Dr. Lee, that kids are reacting in different ways, to all of these things, and every kid is unique. How does a parent know, or how do they get clued into when their child may need professional support, beyond what they're getting maybe at home? How do we work and sort that out?
Great question. I think that, we really do we expect some aggressive behavior. We expect that kids are going to be impacted and manifesting stress in lots of different ways. When we're thinking about whether those things need to be addressed, we're looking at the frequency, like how often is this happening? Mm-hmm. We're looking at the intensity. Maybe it doesn't happen super frequently, but when it happens, it's so big that it's causing a problem for the family. Similarly, the severity, right? Is it getting in the way of functioning? Is it preventing the child or your family from being able to do the things that they need to do, right? Mm-hmm. Those are all factors that we would kind of consider to determine, is this kind of a typical response to stress? Is this a typical response to stress and does need intervention? Or is this a little bit more over the top and, again, requires a little bit more intensive intervention?
Mm-hmm. Right. And Dr. Any comments?
I think parents are seeing children regressing. So young children regressing in their eating, their sleeping, their potty training, children, teens who really felt the impact of this. Initially, I think there was a reprieve. There was this, oh, great, we're going to be out of school for a couple of weeks. And everybody was so excited and was excited to be able to sleep in and all that. But then I think when it settled in and we realized we can't really see our friends, we have a lot of time, we're not running around going from activity to activity. I think a lot of teens started to feel isolated and withdraw. And I think when you see, I'm speaking of teens because I have one, and just thinking about if he started to not speak to his friends through, Zoom and things like that, or if he didn't go outside and take a bike ride, or if he slept a lot, too much or not enough, or he was eating too much or not enough. So anywhere in there where you're seeing a change in your child's functioning, that kind of goes beyond their being able to bounce back, and it's okay to be upset for a couple of days when you're realizing oh, I really can't see my friends face to face, and it's going to have to be through the computer, or if I do see my friend, it's going to have to be across the street, or, if we're walking, taking a walk or taking a bike ride or things like that. I think a lot of those realities set in, and some people are able to adjust and go, all right, this stinks, but I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And then some other kids were like, this really stinks. And then the number of tantrums, even meltdowns, and that can really take the whole gamut from childhood to adults like myself, who had many meltdowns through this.
The trend, right, guys? The trend. It's did we regress, but then kind of it is slowly getting better within this new normal, right? Or is it that it's oh, this regressed, and then it almost feels like we're continuing to go in the wrong direction, right? So the trend, I think, of behavior also makes a really big difference in helping us, even as professionals, to determine what level of intervention or support might be needed.
That's great. I know, in my own house, with our kids, the kid who's had the toughest time is our daughter, who's autistic. She has a rare disease called Duke 15q syndrome. And, going without the therapies that she typically has at school and all that. This is back in the spring semester, when schools first shut down. I know you both work with parents of children with special needs and with those children as well. What advice are you giving parents, or what kind of instruction on how to manage a situation that's a little bit different than with typical kids?
Yeah, I can definitely start. I think that, the very first thing that I try to make sure that I do is lather on the empathy and make sure that those parents are really actually taking some credit for all of the impressive things that they probably are doing really well. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of parents that I work with, and particularly parents of children with special needs who have now been tasked with not just being an educator, but being a special educator, maybe being an OT, a PT, and a speech therapist on a different day of the week, right? That's a real challenge. You didn't go to school for a million years to figure those things out, right? And so the very first thing I'm doing is providing empathy and really asking parents to be a little bit more more kind to themselves in relation to their expectations. I think I'm also really urging parents, if at all possible, to seek out the supports and resources that were once really helpful for their children, to learn a little bit more about the strategies, the routines, the techniques that might have been really useful or effective with their children in other environments, so that they become a little bit more privy to what was going on in those situations. And then also really being clear, particularly for a child with autism or a child that has maybe some rigidity or anxiety around routines and structures, really thinking about ways to adapt the family life or adapt your family situation so that your child does have a little bit more predictability, consistency, or structure, even if it's not high demands or what they were doing previously, dropping the bar to make sure that we're building good momentum and getting good compliance in place, or, making sure that that child does feel supported and that their needs are being met.
If I can piggyback, I have suggested to parents to reach out to their teachers and find out what the schedule was and try to mimic it as much as possible at home, and having a consistent schedule, even if we're not saying at 2:00 we're doing this and 2:30 we're doing this, even if it's not by the hour, just even the sequence. So it feels like we're getting up in the morning and we have a routine, things that we're doing, and then building in, some fun time as well. And some downtime then for the parents is really important. But I think the key point being engage your teachers. And if there's a lesson or an assignment that you're having a hard time with, let them have the Zoom call or the Google Meet call to teach it to them themselves. Having tried to instruct my 7-year-old, which was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life, and I'm not looking forward to it again in the fall at all, I really want to engage his teachers to say, like, this is an assignment I can't get through. Can you please have a call with him to be able to teach it to him? Because when you teach it to him, it's very different than me. Like, I make demands on him all day long. He doesn't want to hear another thing from me, like brush your teeth, get dressed, take a shower, and then on top of that, let's sit down with your spelling words and let's do your math lesson. He doesn't want to hear it from me. It's too much. I took on way too many roles. And at one point he was like, "Mom, I'm on vacation." And I was like, "This is vacation, honey? Okay, I love your perspective. Go live in your la la land. Maybe I'll come and join you." But coming back, just that whole idea of, find those supports, find out what their schedule looked like and recreate it. Consistency is really key for a lot of our children with special needs, and our anxious ones, like my own daughter, she created her own schedule because that's, she wanted to have a certain wake up time and a certain time that she did her academic work and so forth, and what time she took her lunch, etc. And that kind of eased her anxiety during that time, in addition to meeting with her teachers, which was really helpful.
It's like brainstorming with these teachers too. I have a family that I work with that their child was really struggling in the morning, and the teacher was willing to actually tape herself singing their morning meeting songs. And actually the teacher isn't available every morning when that child is now getting up, but the recording of the teacher singing the hello, hello, hello song is available, right? And that is something that I think the child not only looks forward to, but finds comfort in, right? And so we do know that a lot of our kids were robbed of their consistency and their predictability. And so even though it might seem like a small thing or even a little bit silly to maybe us as adults, even something as simple as that morning meeting, or being able to kind of have the snack song or the cleanup song that kind of goes along with things. And for older kids, honestly, being able to touch base with that person or have them, available to, through video calls and things like that can make a really big difference.
So it sounds like what you're talking to both parents and even teachers about is, I love the idea of the brainstorming. That, again, this is new to all of us. So let's be open and try some, new approaches and be creative about it. So parents should be thinking about it. If something's not working, let's go directly to the teacher and figure out, explain what is or isn't working or isn't happening, and not be afraid to try something new.
I totally agree. And Mike, one thing I do just want to say, I grew up with two parents, teacher parents, right? So one taught special education for 30 plus years. My dad taught high school. And so I just feel like I also need to make sure I say out loud that teachers are in very precarious situations themselves right now. Many of them are also trying to do remote learning with their kids, and similar to the way DrLiz was just describing. And so, what we know is that there's not a perfect answer. If there was, we'd all be doing it, right? So I think it's really important to be kind and approach teachers in the same collaborative way that we have in the past. I talk with parents a lot about the fact that, you praise your kids, you could praise the educators too, right? You get more, you get a little bit more with the honey than you do the vinegar, right? And so I think if you're kind of approaching a teacher and just saying, this doesn't work, I'm really frustrated, that's a lot different than saying something like, these are the 3 things that I think are going really well, and the effort that I can tell you're putting in, and it just really feels very valuable to me. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be paying off in the way that I was expecting or the way that we're thinking it should. And so let's put our heads together to figure this out, right? I think that goes a lot better and a lot more, it's just a lot more approachable, I guess. And, maybe I'm biased with 2 parent teachers, but just say.
No, it's a good perspective.
No, the brownie points are important, right? In terms of, and the recognition that this is a new world for teachers as well. That they were not trained to teach over, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or, all of those different things, that this is new for them as well. So shifting a little bit toward to the parents now, it's a new situation for parents. Many of them are working from home. They're now teaching at home to some extent. How can parents kind of take care of themselves? What are you suggesting to them? Because I know in my own household, anxiety has gone up over the last several months. So how are you talking to parents about this?
I think with parents who are working in addition to teaching, just some really practical strategies, such as if you have a particular workspace that you can maintain in a space in the house, if you're able, so that becomes your designated workspace. Because I know for the first probably month, I just felt like my world was one big swirl, and there was no beginning, no end, no defined boundaries to it at all. And at one point, I worked out of my home. I worked out of my dining room that I converted into an office. And even then, I could close the door and leave. And my husband started to work from home, so he took over the office. So I'm sitting in the sunroom, and I'm like, this isn't an office. This is a mess. And it just having a defined space where you can put your stuff down, and at some point kind of decide when you're going to end. Because I think the other thing that we are doing as parents is we're working a little bit in the morning while they're still asleep. We're working, we're opening up some time to teach, and then we're going back to work, and then the kids are going back to sleep and we're going back to work. And it's just one very long day of work, whether it's your kids' work or your work. And so setting some parameters as much as you're able to say, I'm going to work from this time to this time. And when I'm done, even if you're working at a table, put a sheet over it, for goodness sakes, or close the door if you can, but just kind of set parameters for yourself. And I know, again, when this all started, my thought was I was going to cook every night, and I was going to be the house cleaner and the teacher, and I was going to bake and entertain, and I was going to be everything. And then after a couple of weeks, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Yeah. I don't want to do this. I started to burn out, which a lot of parents are burning out. And so that kind of setting some realistic expectations. And like you said, Dr. Stephanie, in terms of be kind to yourself, because we've taken on a lot of new roles, and we don't know what we're doing right now. We're kind of going along and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work for us as parents, and what works for our kids, and what balance we need, what we're, how much screen time we're going to allow just for our sanity, so I can make some dinner or I can get some work done and make a couple phone calls. We're doing the best we can and figuring it out as we go along. But I think self-care, in terms of just set your expectations for the day. And as I'm saying to you, I'm going day by day at this point. It's day by day. What am I going to do? And don't plan these lavish meals and all that stuff. If it ends up being chicken and nuggets and mac and cheese, go for it.
I totally agree, Dr. Liz. I could not, I'm 100% on board with you with all the things you just said. I think boundaries are a real important factor right now. And I can even imagine some of the parents who are watching this kind of doing like getting exercise with their eye rolling at home, like, oh yeah, boundaries, good luck. But exactly like you were just saying, Dr. Liz, I think making sure that you do that if it's environmentally by shutting a door, putting a sheet up, right? Even using a visual with your child. I have a lot of kids right now that understand that the visual stoplight in their house now means something really important. And so when their parents are on red, come heck or high water, even if they bang on that door, they're going to stay on that video conference call. But as soon as their parents on green, they're out and they're available and ready to roll, right? I think parents need to chunk their time, just like Dr. Liz was saying, and really make sure that they're present in the moment with what they're doing. So if you did decide to do work, you're doing work, right? Yeah. Put the mirror phones in, do some work, right? Even if they're screaming in the background, if they're not killing each other, they're not bleeding, right? They're probably okay. Keep doing your work, right? But then when it's time to do your remote learning with your 7-year-old, that's what you're doing, right? Put your phone away, put your work away if you can, and really kind of put yourself in that place. Be realistic about your expectations. I've seen a lot of to-do lists lately, like you're saying, Dr. Liz, that I'm thinking, wow, what other army of team do you have working with you? Like that I'm not aware of. And why are they allowed to be in your house during the pandemic? No, I'm just kidding. But no, really do need to be realistic. And I think sometimes, adding things to your list that are just things that you do on a daily basis, but you're maybe not giving yourself credit for is also important, right? So the same way that I said, I think parents are sometimes at the end of the day taking stock of the things they didn't get done. I encourage them to have a brag book and actually keep a list on their phone of the things they did do well that day. And sometimes those things are just like my 4-year-old didn't hit my 7-year-old more times than yesterday. They still hit each other plenty. I know they did, but I think it was less than yesterday. So I'm counting that as a win, right? Or we all got dressed from the top up. I'm counting that as a win today, right? But I think being really, realistic about those things. And then I'm going to play dirty a little bit here because I know that there are some anxious parents out there that are, again, thinking, yeah. The truth of the matter is I have the best mom in the entire world. I just got done telling you she taught special education for 30 years, right? And I still joke with her to this day that she modeled everything impeccably for me except self-care. Right? So that's the one thing she probably didn't model so well for me, to be completely honest. And I think this is a rare opportunity that we have as adults to kind of tell kids that we have to put the mask on ourselves first, right? I'm the captain of the ship. If the ship's going down, the whole ship's going down with me. And so even though it might feel more appropriate to play this game right now with my kid who really wants me to, I'm going to I'm going to lock myself in the bathroom and I'm going to actually play a couple rounds of Candy Crush myself because I need a moment, and that's okay because it's getting me closer to my best self to be able to play that round of Mario Kart a little bit later tonight.
Perfectly said.
And you both mentioned, again, there's kind of this dual role now for a lot of parents in terms of they are teaching to some extent, or at least they have to play a role in making sure things are getting done. And especially for parents with multiple kids, I know my own, we have one who would wake up and, jump into all the schoolwork he had. Again, this was back in more of the spring semester. And by 10 o'clock in the morning, he's done with everything he's supposed to do. And another one who hasn't touched anything until dinner and then is like, oh, do I still have to go and do that? What are some ideas you have for approaches for parents on without, really just saying, getting with their kids and being there every single moment, but making sure that they're still learning, they're still getting that. It's tough because we don't want to be overbearing, but we want our kids to learn. So how do you, split that divide?
I think when it comes to the learning piece, we're really doing the best that we can. And I know for watching my son through the spring, there was a lot that we were missing. And just sitting there with him, I realized he was missing a lot of skills. And so for me, I'm continuing over the summer with some of those basic skills. And that's making me feel better. Whether it's for him or for me, I'm not really sure. But just having him read to me, do some math problems, and spending a little bit of time each day doing that. But this question has been asked a lot, the fact that our kids are behind. Yeah, they are behind, but you know what? They're all behind together. So either the expectations are going to change at some point, the standards of education are going to change in order to accommodate what's been happening, or I don't know, somehow maybe they'll catch up. I'm not positive about how it all is going to come together, but the thing that's comforting for me is that it's not my 3 kids that are going to be behind alone. It's everybody is going to be behind. And so I think it's going to be part of a bigger system problem that is going to have to be remedied at some point. So I will do my absolute best. I'm hiring tutors. We're working on stuff over the summer. My kids are, giving me the middle finger constantly for the tutors coming to the door, but it is what it is. But that's what I'm doing almost as a part of my due diligence so that I can sleep at night. But I think we're all in this together.
It is. And I think this sibling piece is just so hard, Mike. I mean, to your point, about like just even the differences amongst your family, right? Like right there, right? And, I think about that in my own family and things like that. And everybody has strengths. Everybody has things that they're still working on. I think you as parents being super aware of the strengths and limitations of your kids and then kind of designing the household structure and plan a little bit to accommodate that is probably the best bet. I think it's also important to make sure that when you are getting your child started, initiating and getting them moving and grooving, that you can do a little bit of scaffolding, right? So kids may need you to be on it with them every single moment. Some kids require that. Mm-hmm. Some kids require you to do that from the start, but then you can fade yourself a little bit across time and monitor a little bit more, proactively. One thing I will caution parents around, and I think that this is happening a ton these days with teenagers and adolescents, that we are kind of relying to do what they need to do. And we're kind of walking by and then seeing that they're on something else when maybe they're supposed to be on the class. And they're like, what are you doing? Hey, aren't you supposed to be, with the tutor and the virtual tutor? What's going on there, right? I find that parents are pretty good at being reactive and catching their kids, but they're maybe not great at like catching a few minutes before that when the kid actually was engaged or on task. So I would say that if parents can try to make a point to accentuate the positive just a little bit more than they were previously, or making a big deal out of that, it can go a long way. But that chunking stuff and even that traffic light stuff that I was talking about, like when you're available for each kid and things, can, again, just help parents, I think, to think a little bit more strategically about how they're spreading their own attention.
That's great. I've heard so many things that are encouraging here. I've heard that kids are a lot more resilient than sometimes we give them credit for, which is great to hear. I love how open you are, both of you are, about how this is hard for all of us, including like the 3 of us that are out here right now. You guys are professionals at this, and you're struggling too. It makes, I think, a lot of others feel good, or at least understanding that again, we're all dealing with this together. I love the idea of taking things day by day. A lot of us want to plan forward for everything, and the whole world is having to take it day by day right now with everything that we're going through, and especially all the idea about being kind. That's the self-care for ourselves, being kind to ourselves, being kind to our teachers that are out there. And we'll get the most out of them if we first think about what they're doing well, right, and helping our kids with, being kind to our kids. So recognizing the things that they are doing well. We often, I know in our house, we try to resist saying no to everything. We have to find things to say yes to, as well. What other kind of final thoughts would you have for the parents at home right now who want their kids to do well? They're gearing up for the school year with a lot of questions. What other final thoughts might you have for them?
I would just also say, Mike, that, the way we were saying, be kind to your kids, be kind to the teachers, be kind to yourself. If you do have a partner, this is a great time to be kind to them as well. So labeled praise or being specific in your praise goes a long way, not just for kids, but for adults as well. And so if your partner or the one that you're kind of sharing this trauma with is, particularly helpful, or if they actually just don't react in a big way when you think that they might have. I was speaking with a family earlier today that the dad, he is actually out of the home working. And when he comes home, he is just so overwhelmed by the mess that is often in his living room and across many rooms in their house and things. And his partner was mentioning to me today, he came in and he was a little bit more calm. And I said, did you praise it? Did you say to him, thanks for letting it go? Thanks for coming in. I know it's overwhelming after a long day, but I really appreciate you not getting on my back about the Legos on the floor. I know you stepped on one, but I really appreciate that, right? So I think that labeled praise thing and just kind of emphasizing the positive, kind of regardless of who you're with, is really important right now.
One thing I started doing with my kids is really trying to engage them as much as possible and understanding that right now, more than ever, we need to have a team approach to running the house. And so you can call it bribery, you can call it a reward, depends on how you look at it. I offer them money for doing chores. And so, or they're helping each other, like help make your brother breakfast or lunch if I'm in a session, taking out the garbage, anything they do, they can earn for. And right now they like to order from Amazon and Target because what else is there to do? So I'm like, if you want money to spend, you're going to have to earn it. But you're also very much helping the family at large and making sure that the garbage goes out and their dishes are moved, and from the dishwasher, from the sink to the dishwasher away. So just trying to keep them engaged because my 3 kids are not in camp. Camp was shut down. So there's 3 kids here all the time, every day, all the time. And so I'm trying to keep them engaged as much as possible and then rewarding them with money that they can use to spend to get what they want.
You got it, DrLiz. I joke all the time with parents. It isn't bribery if it was proactive, right? It's
I like that.
Contract. It's right. You can't. It's bribery if you waited for them to misbehave and then started offering the bells and whistles. But truth be told, I'm in a behavioral contract every 2 weeks with Child Mind Institute. I love kids and families, but if they didn't pay me a paycheck, I probably wouldn't do all the work, right? So behavioral contracts are a part of life. And if kids have to learn that a little bit earlier now than they did in the past, then so be it. But I love the team approach idea. And I think that that's an excellent way of really making sure, too, that you're able to foster the dialogue and the collaboration that we're really talking about.
And it gives a lot of opportunity for me to say, thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you. That made a big difference for me because I didn't have to worry about your 7-year-old brother not eating for 3 hours while I was in session.
I think that is a great way to wrap it up with the team approach. If we all go in this together, parents, teachers, kids, spouses, partners, all of that, we'll all be better off. So Dr. Stephanie, DrLiz, thank you so much for joining us. I know my wife was at home taking notes around all of this. And I'm sure there's a lot of others out there too. Thank you again so much for everything here, and hope to bring you on again.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Good luck,
everyone.
All right, take care.